The corridors of Medical Station Helix 7 gleamed with the cold perfection that only the Zephyrian Empire could achieve. Crystalline walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, and the air itself hummed with the sophisticated technology that kept this floating medical fortress operational in the depths of space. To most beings in the galaxy, this was a temple of healing, where the finest alien physicians practiced medicine that bordered on miraculous. To Marcus Chen, it was Tuesday. "Disgusting," muttered Dr. Kethara as she stepped around the human mopping the floor near Surgery Bay 7. Her forearms gestured dismissively at the puddle of cleaning solution. "Can't they train these creatures to work more efficiently? Look at those primitive movements." Marcus kept his head down, methodically working the sonic mop across the biosteel flooring. After 3 years on Helix 7, he'd learned that invisibility was survival. The Zephyrian medical staff saw him as little more than a talking pet, useful for menial tasks, but hardly worthy of acknowledgement as a sentient being. "The human belongs to Dr. Vextar," replied Dr. Silthon, his serpentine neck craning to observe Marcus with clinical detachment. "Apparently he finds its emotional responses amusing. Some sort of psychological study." "Emotional responses?" Dr. Kethara's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "From that thing? I've seen more personality in a maintenance drone." Marcus squeezed the mop handle tighter but continued his work. They weren't entirely wrong. In their presence, he'd learned to become a ghost, present, but not truly there. It was the only way to survive in a place where your species was considered barely above livestock. The truth was more complicated, but Marcus had never bothered to correct their assumptions. Dr. Vextar hadn't acquired him as a pet or a study subject. 3 years ago, Marcus had been a maintenance engineer on a human colony ship that suffered catastrophic system failures near Zephyrian space. When the Helix 7 responded to their distress call, only Marcus and 17 other humans had survived. The other survivors had been relocated to human territories within 6 months. Marcus had volunteered to stay, not because he loved being treated like a curiosity, but because Dr. Vextar had saved his daughter's life. 8-year-old Sarah had been dying from exposure to exotic radiation, her small body unable to cope with the alien energies that had flooded their ship. The human medical knowledge available was primitive compared to Zephyrian biotechnology, but most alien doctors refused to treat humans. Too different, too risky, too beneath their notice. Dr. Vextar had spent 18 hours in surgery, adapting Zephyrian medical techniques to human physiology. He'd saved Sarah's life, and when the insurance consortium tried to bill Marcus for treatment costs that would have bankrupted a small planet, Vextar had quietly arranged for the debt to disappear. In return, Marcus had offered to work off the obligation. What he hadn't expected was how that arrangement would evolve. "Marcus," the voice cut through his thoughts like a plasma scalpel. "Doctor." Vextar stood in the doorway of his private office, his tall, angular frame casting sharp shadows on the corridor floor. Unlike the other Zephyrians with their elaborate biomechanical augmentations and decorative genetic modifications, Vextar kept himself relatively unadorned. His pale blue skin bore only the standard medical interface ports, and his large dark eyes held an intelligence that seemed to catalogue everything around him. "Yes, Doctor?" Marcus straightened, setting aside his cleaning equipment. "My office now." The two gossiping doctors exchanged knowing looks as Marcus followed Vextar down the corridor. They probably assumed he was in trouble, or that Vextar was conducting some new behavioral experiment. Neither was uncommon on Helix 7. Vextar's office was a study in controlled chaos. Holographic displays showing patient data, alien artifacts from a dozen worlds, and medical journals scattered across surfaces that defied human understanding of physics. A large viewport showed the swirling nebula that Helix 7 currently orbited, its colors shifting through spectrums that human eyes could barely perceive. "Sit," Vextar said, gesturing to the human-sized chair he'd installed 3 years ago. Marcus sat, waiting. In all their time together, he'd learned that Vextar chose his words carefully. The doctor was brilliant, but he was also methodical in a way that sometimes made conversations feel like medical procedures. "I'm leaving the station tomorrow," Vextar said finally. "The Zephyrian Medical Consortium has assigned me to the Kethmoran system. There's been an outbreak of quantum plague, and they need someone with my specialized experience." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "For how long?" "Indefinitely. The plague has been resistant to standard treatments. It could be months, possibly years before it's contained." "I see." Marcus kept his voice neutral, though his mind was racing. What would happen to him when Vextar left? The other doctors barely tolerated his presence as it was. Without Vextar's protection, he'd likely be transferred off-station or worse. "There's something else," Vextar continued, his dark eyes studying Marcus with that clinical intensity. "The assignment came through unusual channels. The consortium typically doesn't handle plague outbreaks. That's the jurisdiction of the Imperial Health Division. Someone specifically requested my involvement. Is that concerning?" "Everything about this assignment is concerning." Vextar leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since Marcus had known him, the doctor looked genuinely troubled. "The Kethmoran system is in disputed space. 3 different species claim territorial rights, and none of them particularly like each other. Sending medical personnel there is either an act of desperation or someone wants me in a very specific place, very far from here." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental controls. "You think someone's trying to get rid of you?" "I think," Vextar said slowly, "that I've been asking too many questions about certain research projects, and someone has decided that I might be more useful elsewhere." Before Marcus could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Not the gentle chimes that announced shift changes or meal periods, but the harsh, urgent klaxon that meant emergency. The emergency klaxon cut through the station like a serrated blade, and immediately the corridor outside Vextar's office filled with the controlled chaos of medical personnel responding to crisis. Through the viewport, Marcus could see emergency lights flashing across the docking bay, where a massive transport vessel sat, twisted and smoking. "Collision in Docking Bay 3, came the announcement over the station's communication system. "All emergency medical teams to Bay 3 immediately. All emergency medical teams to Bay 3. Vextar was already moving, his long strides carrying him toward a wall panel that slid open to reveal his emergency medical kit. "Stay here, Marcus. If this is what I think it is." "Doctor." The voice belonged to Chief Medical Officer Grixtal, whose bulk filled the doorway. The Gordanian's 6 eyes fixed on Vextar with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. "You're needed in the emergency bay. Now." "I was just—" "Now, Doctor." There was something in Grixtal's tone that brooked no argument, and Marcus watched as Vextar gathered his equipment with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times before. But as the doctor moved toward the door, Marcus caught something in his expression, a flicker of suspicion quickly masked. "Marcus," Vextar said without turning around, "monitor my office communications. If anyone asks, I'll be in surgery for the next several hours." It was an odd instruction, but Marcus nodded. "Yes, Doctor." As soon as they were gone, the office felt oppressively quiet, despite the ongoing emergency alerts. Marcus moved to the communication console, more out of nervous energy than any real understanding of what he was supposed to be monitoring. The displays showed standard medical readouts, patient files, and administrative messages, nothing that seemed immediately concerning. But then he noticed something odd. Buried in the routine communications log was a message that had arrived just minutes before the emergency began. The sender was listed as Medical Supply Consortium, but when Marcus opened it, the content was far from routine. "Shipment delayed indefinitely. Recommend alternative sourcing for Project Nightfall components. Suggest consulting Dr. Vextar's replacement when transition is complete." Marcus stared at the message, his blood running cold. Project Nightfall? And what did they mean by Vextar's replacement? The doctor had just told him about the Kethmoran assignment, but this message suggested that someone had already arranged for his departure and his replacement. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made Marcus quickly close the message and step away from the console. Dr. Kethara appeared in the doorway, her 4 arms moving with the quick, nervous gestures that Marcus had learned indicated either excitement or stress. "Where's Dr. Vextar?" she demanded. "Emergency bay, the transport accident." "Accident?" She laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Is that what they're calling it?" Before Marcus could ask what she meant, she was gone again, leaving him alone with questions that seemed to multiply by the minute. 20 minutes later, the emergency alerts ceased, replaced by the calm, clinical announcements that meant the crisis had been handled. Marcus expected Vextar to return soon after, but an hour passed, then 2 without any sign of the doctor. Finally, unable to stand the uncertainty, Marcus left the office and made his way toward the emergency medical bay. The corridors were returning to normal activity, but there was an undercurrent of tension that seemed to affect everyone on the station. Alien medical staff moved with quick, furtive steps, and conversations stopped when he passed. The emergency bay was a controlled chaos of activity. Medical teams worked over several patients, mostly Zephyrians from the look of it, while automated systems cleaned and sterilized equipment with mechanical precision. Marcus spotted Dr. Silthon near one of the surgical stations and approached carefully. "Excuse me, doctor. I'm looking for Dr. Vextar." Silthon looked up from his patient, his serpentine features showing surprise. "The human speaks without permission. How unusual." He turned back to his work. "Your owner is indisposed. Is he treating patients?" In a manner of speaking, Silthon's laugh was dry and humorless. "He's become one." The world seemed to tilt beneath Marcus's feet. "What do you mean?" "There was an explosion during the rescue operation, some kind of plasma conduit failure. Dr. Vextar was caught in the blast." Silthon finally looked up again, and there was something in his expression that might have been sympathy. "He's alive, but barely. Severe plasma burns, internal injuries. They've taken him to Surgery Bay 1. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "How bad?" "Bad enough that Chief Medical Officer Grixtal has already begun making arrangements for his transition." "Transition? To whatever comes after, human. Your Dr. Vextar is dying." Marcus stood there for a moment, processing the words. Then, without asking permission, he turned and ran towards Surgery Bay 1. The bay was sealed, surrounded by the standard quarantine fields that indicated major surgery in progress. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see a team of doctors working over a figure on the surgical table, a figure he recognized despite the medical equipment obscuring most of the body. Vextar lay unconscious, his pale blue skin bearing angry red burns that looked like they went deep into tissue. Monitoring equipment surrounded the table, displaying vital signs that fluctuated in ways that looked ominous, even to Marcus's untrained eye. "He can't see you, you know." Marcus turned to find Dr. Grixtal standing behind him, the Gordanian's massive form blocking most of the corridor. "He's sedated for the surgery. Has been for hours. Will he survive?" "That depends on many factors." Grixtal moved closer, and Marcus had to fight the urge to step back. "The injuries are severe. Even with our advanced techniques, the prognosis is uncertain, but you'll do everything you can." "Of course." Grixtal's smile revealed rows of sharp teeth. "Dr. Vextar is a valuable member of our medical team. We would never want to lose someone of his unique qualifications." There was something in the way Grixtal said it that made Marcus's skin crawl, but before he could analyze the feeling, another doctor emerged from the surgical bay. It was Dr. Nalseth, one of the station's senior surgeons, and her expression was grim. "Chief Medical Officer," she said to Grixtal, "we need to discuss the patient's treatment options." "Of course. Human." Grixtal addressed Marcus without looking at him. "Return to your quarters. There's nothing for you to do here." "I'd like to wait." That wasn't a request. Marcus looked back through the window at Vextar's unconscious form, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir." But as he walked away, he heard Grixtal speaking in low tones to Dr. Nalseth. "How long until we can implement the secondary protocol?" "Give me 12 hours to stabilize him. Then we can begin the transition process." Marcus kept walking, but his mind was racing. Secondary protocol, transition process. It sounded like they were talking about something other than standard medical treatment, and in the back of his mind, that message from earlier kept echoing. "Recommend consulting Dr. Vextar's replacement when transition is complete." It seemed like Dr. Vextar's suspicions about someone wanting him gone might have been more accurate than he'd realized. Marcus didn't return to his quarters. Instead, he found himself in one of the station's maintenance corridors, a network of passages that most of the medical staff ignored. 3 years of cleaning every surface on Helix 7 had given him an intimate knowledge of the station's hidden spaces, and right now, he needed time to think without being observed. The conversation between Grixtal and Dr. Nalseth kept replaying in his mind. Secondary protocol, transition process. The words had a clinical coldness that suggested they weren't talking about standard medical procedures. Marcus had learned enough about Zephyrian medicine to know that their technology was incredibly advanced. Plasma burns that would kill most species could be treated successfully if caught in time. The fact that they were talking about transition processes instead of healing protocols suggested something else entirely. He made his way back toward Vextar's office through the maintenance passages, emerging in a storage area 2 levels down from the main medical corridors. The office would be sealed now, but Marcus had watched Vextar input the access codes hundreds of times during his cleaning duties. The office was dark when he entered, illuminated only by the swirling colors of the nebula outside the viewport. Marcus moved carefully to the communication console and began searching through the message logs more thoroughly than he'd been able to earlier. What he found made his blood run cold. Hidden beneath layers of routine communications were messages that painted a picture of conspiracy that went far beyond what he'd imagined. Messages between Grixtal and someone identified only as Consortium Administrator, discussing Project Nightfall and the Human Subject Acquisition Program. One message, dated just 2 days ago, was particularly chilling. Vextar continues to ask questions about the human experimentation protocols. His departure to Kethmaran has been arranged, but suggests accelerating timeline. The human specimen in his possession may need to be transferred to more secure facilities. Human specimen. They weren't talking about a pet or a servant. They were talking about a test subject. Marcus's hands shook as he continued reading. More messages revealed details about medical experiments being conducted on humans throughout Zephyrian space. Experiments that violated every interstellar treaty regarding sentient beings. Genetic manipulation, neural modification, biological weapons testing, and Dr. Vextar had been investigating it. The door to the office suddenly hissed open, and Marcus spun around to find Dr. Kethera standing in the entrance. Her forearms moved with agitation as she stepped inside. "I thought I might find you here," she said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. Marcus tensed, ready to run, but she held up one hand in a gesture that might have been reassurance. "Don't," she said. "I'm not here to report you." "Then why are you here?" "Because I think you deserve to know what's really happening to Dr. Vexistar." She moved to the communication console and began pulling up files with quick, nervous gestures. "I've been monitoring the surgical proceedings. What they're doing to him, it's not standard treatment." "What do you mean?" "They're not trying to heal him, they're preparing him for neural extraction." Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Neural extraction. They're going to remove his memories, his personality engrams, everything that makes him him. Then they'll upload it all to a secure database where it can be analyzed and processed. Kethara's voice was tight with what sounded like fear. "It's a procedure they use on criminals and dissidents. Once it's complete, the original consciousness is destroyed." "But why?" "He's a doctor. He saves lives. Because he's been investigating Project Nightfall, and he's gotten too close to the truth." Kethara pulled up a holographic display that showed brain scan patterns. "These are from his medical files. See these neural patterns? They indicate someone who's been exposed to classified information that the Consortium wants to extract and analyze." Marcus stared at the display, trying to process what he was seeing. "How long do we have?" "The neural extraction is scheduled for tomorrow morning. They're calling it experimental treatment for plasma-induced brain trauma, but I've seen the real surgical protocols." Kethara's arms moved in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of distress among her species. "Once they begin, there's no reversing the process." "Why are you telling me this? You barely acknowledge my existence most of the time." Kethara was quiet for a long moment, her large eyes reflecting the swirling colors from the viewport. "Because 3 years ago, I watched Dr. Vextar spend 18 hours saving a human child's life. He didn't have to do that. Most of us wouldn't have bothered. But he did it anyway, and he did it because he believed that every sentient life has value." She turned to face Marcus directly. "I've spent the last 3 years treating you like an animal, and I was wrong. If Dr. Vextar saw something in your species worth saving, then maybe I should have been paying more attention. Is there anything we can do?" "We?" Kethara's laugh was sharp. "Marcus, I'm already taking a huge risk by telling you this. If the Consortium discovers that I've accessed classified surgical protocols, I'll be facing neural extraction myself." "Then why?" "Because Dr. Vextar was right. Every sentient life has value, even mine and even yours." She began shutting down the displays. "But I can't help you beyond this. I have my own family to protect." As she moved toward the door, Marcus called after her. "Dr. Kethara, the surgical bay. Is it possible for someone to access it without authorization?" She stopped, not turning around. "The maintenance shafts connect to the surgical bays through the atmospheric processing systems. Standard cleaning protocols would give someone access to the service entrances." She paused. "But security sweeps are conducted every 4 hours, and if someone were caught in a restricted area?" "I understand. I hope you do." She looked back at him one final time. "Doctor, Vextar saved your daughter's life, but that doesn't mean you have to throw away your own." After she was gone, Marcus sat alone in the dark office, watching the nebula swirl beyond the viewport. Somewhere on this station, The man who had saved Sarah's life was being prepared for a procedure that would destroy everything he was. Marcus had spent 3 years being invisible, being insignificant, being treated like a pet or a curiosity. But Dr. Vextar had never treated him that way. Even when the arrangement between them had been purely transactional, Vextar had spoken to him with the same respect he showed his colleagues, and now they were going to kill him for trying to expose crimes against humanity. Marcus looked at the communication console, then at the maintenance access panel across the room. Dr. Kithara was right. He could access the surgical bay through the maintenance shafts. But what could one human do against an entire medical station full of aliens who saw him as little more than a talking animal? Then he remembered something Vextar had told him during one of their conversations. The most dangerous assumption in medicine is that you know everything about your patient. Sometimes the smallest detail you've overlooked can save a life or cost one. Maybe being overlooked, being dismissed as insignificant, could be an advantage. Marcus began planning. The maintenance shafts of Helix 7 were a labyrinth that most of the station's inhabitants never saw. Built to accommodate automated cleaning systems and emergency repairs, they formed a secondary circulatory system that ran through the station's bones. Marcus had spent countless hours in these passages during his 3 years of service, but tonight they felt different, less like familiar corridors and more like the arteries of some sleeping beast. He'd waited until the 3rd shift began, when most of the medical staff would be focused on routine procedures and administrative duties. The emergency from earlier had disrupted normal schedules, which meant security sweeps might be delayed or altered. It was a small advantage, but Marcus had learned that in a place where he was considered less than human, small advantages were often all he had. The route to Surgery Bay 1 required passing through 3 security checkpoints, but the maintenance passages offered alternatives. Marcus moved carefully through the atmospheric processing junction that connected to the surgical wing, using the ambient noise from the air recycling systems to mask his movement. As he approached the surgical bay, he could hear voices through the maintenance shaft's access panel. The conversation was in Zephyrian, but Marcus had picked up enough of the language during his time on the station to understand fragments. Neural patterns are stabilizing. Begin extraction sequence in 6 hours. Ensure complete data recovery. Marcus pressed his ear closer to the panel. Through the metal, he could hear the steady beeping of medical equipment and the soft hiss of life support systems. Vextar was still alive, but barely. He found the service entrance to the surgical bay's atmospheric control system and carefully removed the access panel. The space beyond was cramped, designed for automated maintenance drones rather than human-sized intruders, but Marcus had learned to navigate tight spaces during his cleaning duties. The surgical bay appeared through a ventilation grate near the ceiling. Below him, Dr. Vextar lay unconscious on a surgical table, surrounded by medical equipment that pulsed with alien energies. His injuries looked even worse than Marcus had seen through the window earlier. The plasma burns covered nearly half his body, and the monitoring equipment showed vital signs that fluctuated wildly. But it was the additional equipment that made Marcus's blood run cold. Neural extraction apparatus surrounded Vextar's head like a metallic crown. Cables and probes connected to interface ports that had been surgically implanted in his skull. The machine itself was a work of art, beautiful and terrible, designed to carefully dismantle a living mind while preserving every detail for analysis. Beautiful, isn't it? Marcus nearly fell from his hiding place as Chief Medical Officer Grixtal entered the surgical bay below. The massive Gordanian moved with surprising grace for someone of his size, his 6 eyes examining the extraction equipment with obvious pride. The neural extraction array is one of the consortium's finest achievements, Grixtal continued, speaking to someone Marcus couldn't see. We can harvest every memory, every thought pattern, every trace of neural activity. When we're finished, we'll know everything Dr. Vextar learned about our operations. And the human. The second voice belonged to Dr. Nalseth. What about it? Vextar's attachment to the creature might have contaminated his neural patterns. Should we extract the human's memories as well? Unnecessary. The human is a simple creature, barely sentient by consortium standards. Any information it might possess would be fragmentary at best. Grixtal's laugh rumbled through the chamber. Besides, we have other uses for it once the extraction is complete. The breeding program? Among other things, human physiology has proven surprisingly adaptable to genetic modification. With Vextar gone, no one will object to transferring the creature to the research division. Marcus felt sick. They were talking about him like he was livestock, discussing his future with the casual indifference of farmers planning their next crop rotation. But more than that, they were planning to murder Dr. Vextar and harvest his memories like data from a computer. "How long until the procedure begins?" Dr. Nalseth asked. 4 hours. The neural patterns need time to stabilize after the trauma from his injuries. We only get one chance at a complete extraction. And if he regains consciousness during the process, he won't. The sedatives will keep him under until the extraction is complete. By the time the process ends, there won't be enough neural activity left for consciousness. They continued talking, but Marcus had heard enough. He carefully replaced the ventilation grate and began making his way back through the maintenance shafts. His mind raced as he considered his options. 4 hours. He had 4 hours to figure out how to stop a medical procedure being performed by some of the most advanced alien physicians in the galaxy. 4 hours to save the life of the one person on this station who had ever treated him with genuine respect. Marcus had no medical training, no understanding of Zephyrian technology, and no weapons beyond his janitor's cleaning supplies. What he did have was intimate knowledge of the station's systems, 3 years of being ignored and underestimated, and a growing anger that burned hotter than plasma conduits. He made his way back to Vextar's office and began searching through the doctor's personal files. If Vextar had been investigating Project Nightfall, he might have discovered vulnerabilities in the consortium's operations, weaknesses that Marcus could exploit. What he found was better than he'd hoped. Hidden in Vextar's personal medical research were detailed schematics of neural extraction equipment. The doctor had been studying the technology, apparently trying to understand how it worked, and, more importantly, how it could be sabotaged. The extraction process relied on precise neural mapping. If that mapping could be disrupted, if the equipment received conflicting signals or incorrect calibration data, the entire procedure would fail. More than that, improper calibration could damage the extraction apparatus itself, potentially beyond repair. Marcus studied the schematics until his eyes burned. The neural extraction array had multiple redundant systems, but they all relied on a central processing unit that coordinated the mapping protocols. If someone could access that unit and introduce corrupted data into the calibration sequence, but the central processor was located inside the surgical bay, surrounded by security systems and medical personnel. There was no way for Marcus to access it directly, unless... Marcus looked at the station schematics, tracing the paths of various utility systems. The neural extraction array required enormous amounts of power and precise environmental controls to function properly. Those systems were managed through the station's central atmospheric and power distribution networks that Marcus had access to as part of his cleaning duties. He began tracing power conduits and atmospheric control systems, looking for points where he could introduce interference into the extraction equipment. It would be delicate work. Too much disruption, and he might kill Vextar outright. Too little, and the procedure would continue normally. But there was another problem. Even if he could sabotage the extraction, Grixtal and his team would simply reschedule the procedure. Marcus needed to do more than delay the inevitable. He needed to expose the entire conspiracy. That's when he remembered the communication logs he'd discovered earlier. Evidence of illegal human experimentation, neural extraction procedures performed on dissidents, violation of interstellar treaties governing sentient rights. If he could broadcast that information throughout the station, or better yet, transmit it to authorities outside Zephyrian space, it might be enough to bring down the entire operation. Marcus looked at the chronometer. 3 hours remaining. Time to get to work. Marcus moved through the station's utility corridors with the precision of someone who had cleaned every surface for 3 years. But tonight, instead of carrying cleaning supplies, he carried a modified maintenance scanner, one of Vextar's diagnostic tools that he'd adapted using information from the neural extraction schematics. The power distribution node that fed Surgery Bay 1 was located in a restricted access area, 3 levels below the medical wing. Getting there required passing through 2 security checkpoints, but Marcus's cleaning credentials still granted him access to most of the station's infrastructure areas. The first checkpoint was automated, a simple biometric scanner that verified his identity and work authorization. Marcus pressed his palm to the reader and held his breath as the system processed his credentials. Green light. Access granted. The second checkpoint was manned by a single Zephyrian security officer who barely looked up from his entertainment display as Marcus approached with his cleaning cart. Working late tonight, human? The guard asked in heavily accented standard. Spill in the power distribution area, Marcus replied, keeping his voice dull and mechanical. Contaminated coolant. Needs immediate cleaning. The guard wrinkled his nose in disgust. Disgusting. Make sure you sanitize properly afterward. Don't want that stench spreading through the station. Yes, sir. The guard waved him through without further interest. To him, Marcus was just another piece of maintenance equipment. Useful, but forgettable. The power distribution node was a cathedral of humming machinery, filled with the precisely orchestrated chaos of systems that kept a medical station operational in the depths of space. Massive conduits carried power to critical systems throughout Helix 7, while monitoring displays showed the flow of energy to different sections. Marcus found the conduit that fed Surgery Bay 1 and carefully connected his modified scanner to the diagnostic port. According to Vextar's research, the neural extraction array required precise power fluctuations to maintain proper neural mapping. If Marcus could introduce subtle variations in the power flow, not enough to damage other systems, but enough to disrupt the extraction process, it might buy him time to implement the second part of his plan. The scanner's display showed him the power patterns feeding the surgical bay. The extraction equipment was already drawing standby power, preparing for the procedure that was now less than 2 hours away. Marcus began programming interference patterns into the power flow, carefully calibrating the disruptions to match the frequencies that would destabilize neural mapping protocols. It was delicate work, requiring precise timing and calculations that pushed the limits of his technical knowledge. But 3 years of watching Vexitar work had taught him more about alien technology than he'd realized. As he worked, Marcus heard footsteps approaching through the corridor outside. He quickly shut down the scanner and grabbed his cleaning supplies, making it appear that he was responding to the fictional coolant spill he'd reported to the guard. Dr. Silthon appeared in the doorway, his serpentine form silhouetted against the corridor lighting. "Human, what are you doing here?" "Cleaning, Doctor. There was a coolant leak that needed immediate attention." Silthon's eyes narrowed as he examined the power distribution equipment. "I see no evidence of contamination." "I already cleaned it, Doctor. That's what I was hired to do." "Indeed." Silthon moved closer, and Marcus could smell the distinctive chemical scent that all Zephyrians carried. "Tell me, human, do you know what's happening to your owner tonight?" Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Dr. Vextar was injured in the transport accident. He's receiving medical treatment." "Medical treatment? Yes, that's one way to describe it." Silthon's laugh was cold and sharp. "Do you know what neural extraction involves?" Marcus felt his heart racing, but he forced himself to appear confused. "I don't understand, Doctor." "Of course you don't. Your species lacks the cognitive capacity for complex medical procedures." Silthon circled around Marcus like a predator evaluating prey. "Neural extraction is the process of removing memories and consciousness from a living brain. It's quite painful, from what I understand, though the subject typically doesn't survive long enough to provide detailed feedback." "Dr. Vextar is going to die." "Oh, he's going to die regardless. The question is whether he dies quickly from his injuries or slowly from having his mind dissected piece by piece." Silthon leaned closer. "I thought you should know, since you seemed attached to him." Marcus let real emotion show in his expression. Grief, fear, helplessness. All feelings that were genuine, even if he was using them to maintain his disguise. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I find your species' emotional responses fascinating. The way you form attachments to beings who consider you little more than pets. It's quite pathetic, really." Silthon straightened and moved toward the door. "Finish your cleaning and return to your quarters. After tonight, there will be significant changes to your living arrangements." After the doctor was gone, Marcus waited several minutes before returning to his work. The encounter with Silthon had been unnerving, but it had also confirmed that his disguise was still intact. They still saw him as nothing more than an emotional, limited creature, incapable of complex thought or planning. That misconception might be the only advantage he had. Marcus completed the power flow modifications and carefully concealed his work. The disruptions would begin automatically when the extraction equipment reached full operational capacity, but the power sabotage was only the first part of his plan. The second part required him to reach the station's main communication array. Marcus made his way back through the security checkpoints, once again playing the role of the dutiful janitor completing routine maintenance. The communication array was located in the station's command section, an area he rarely visited during normal cleaning duties. But tonight, wasn't a normal night. The command section was quieter than the medical wings, staffed by skeleton crews who monitored station operations and handled routine communications. Marcus approached the main communication console with his cleaning cart, appearing to service the equipment while actually accessing the transmission protocols. Uploading the evidence he'd gathered from Vextar's files would require bypassing several security systems, but Marcus had learned more about the station's computer networks than anyone realized. 3 years of being ignored while working around sensitive equipment had given him opportunities to observe access codes, security procedures, and system vulnerabilities. He began the upload process, transmitting the evidence of Project Nightfall and the illegal human experimentation program to multiple destinations: the Interspecies Medical Ethics Board, the Human Colonial Authority, and several independent news organizations that specialized in exposing government corruption. The transmission would take nearly an hour to complete, and every minute increased the risk of discovery. But if Marcus could get the information out before the neural extraction began, it might expose the conspiracy, even if he couldn't save Vextar. As the upload progressed, Marcus monitored the station's security systems for any indication that his activities had been detected. So far, his modifications to the power grid and his unauthorized access to the communication array had gone unnoticed. But that was about to change. An alarm began sounding throughout the command section, not the emergency klaxon from earlier, but the sharp, urgent tone that indicated a security breach. Marcus's blood ran cold as he realized that his presence in a restricted area had finally triggered automated monitoring systems. Security alert. Unauthorized personnel in command section. Security alert. Unauthorized personnel in command section. Marcus looked at the transmission progress. 73% complete. He needed more time, but security teams would be converging on his location within minutes. That's when he heard the sound that made his heart stop, the distinctive hum of neural extraction equipment powering up in the surgical bay far below. They were starting the procedure early. The security alarm continued to blare as Marcus watched the transmission progress crawl toward completion. 87%. The evidence of Project Nightfall was almost fully uploaded, but the sound of boots pounding through corridors told him that security teams were closing in fast. More urgently, the hum of neural extraction equipment from the surgical bay below meant that Dr. Vexitar's life was measured in minutes, not hours. Marcus made a split-second decision. He activated the emergency lockdown protocols for the command section, a system designed to contain security breaches by sealing all entrances. It would buy him a few more minutes, but it would also trap him inside. 92%. The lockdown engaged with a deep mechanical thrum that reverberated through the station's hull. Emergency barriers slid into place, cutting off access corridors and isolating the command section. Outside, Marcus could hear the muffled shouts of security personnel trying to override the lockdown. 96%. The neural extraction equipment's hum grew louder, more insistent. Through the station's internal monitoring systems, Marcus could see feeds from Surgery Bay 1. Dr. Vexistar lay unconscious on the table while Grixital and his team made final preparations for the procedure. The power disruptions Marcus had programmed should have activated by now, but the extraction equipment seemed to be functioning normally. Either his sabotage had failed, or they'd found a way to compensate for the power fluctuations. 99%. A new sound cut through the alarm. Plasma cutters working on the emergency barriers. The security teams weren't waiting for the lockdown to be overridden. They were cutting their way in. 100%. Upload complete. Marcus felt a moment of grim satisfaction. Whatever happened next, the evidence was out there. Multiple organizations across the galaxy now had proof of the consortium's illegal activities, but that victory felt hollow as long as Vextar was still in danger. The plasma cutters breached the first barrier, and Marcus could see the glow of cutting tools working on the secondary entrance. He had perhaps 2 minutes before they reached him. Time for the most desperate part of his plan. Marcus accessed the station's emergency broadcast system, a network designed to send alerts to all personnel simultaneously. Under normal circumstances, only senior command staff could activate it, but the lockdown had granted him temporary administrative privileges. He opened a channel to every communication device on Helix 7. "Attention all station personnel," Marcus began, his voice echoing through corridors, medical bays, and living quarters throughout the station. "This is Marcus Chen, maintenance staff. I am broadcasting evidence of illegal medical experimentation being conducted by Chief Medical Officer Grixtal and the Medical Consortium. The plasma cutting stopped. Throughout the station, alien medical staff paused in their work as the voice of a human, a creature most of them considered barely sentient, filled the air with accusations that could destroy careers and topple governments. Project Nightfall involves the systematic capture, experimentation and murder of human subjects in violation of interstellar law. Evidence has been transmitted to multiple galactic authorities, including detailed records of neural extraction procedures performed on political dissidents. Marcus could hear shouting outside the barriers, voices arguing, demanding explanations, denying accusations. The cutting resumed, but with less urgency. Seeds of doubt had been planted. At this moment, Chief Medical Officer Grixtal is attempting to murder Dr. Vextar using neural extraction to prevent him from exposing these crimes. Dr. Vextar discovered the truth about Project Nightfall, and they're destroying his mind to protect their conspiracy. The plasma cutting stopped again. Through the station's internal monitors, Marcus could see medical personnel gathering in corridors, looking confused and angry. In Surgery Bay 1, he saw Grixtal gesturing frantically at his staff, trying to maintain control of the situation. I know most of you see me as nothing more than a pet or a cleaning tool, but Dr. Vextar saw something different. He saw a sentient being worthy of respect and dignity. 3 years ago, he saved my daughter's life when no one else would even try. Marcus's voice caught slightly, as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. I'm not asking you to care about me. I'm asking you to care about the oath you took as healers. I'm asking you to remember why you became doctors. The barriers suddenly retracted as someone overrode the lockdown from outside. Security personnel flooded into the command section, weapons drawn, but they moved hesitantly. Marcus's broadcast had shaken the foundation of authority on the station. "Stand down, human!" The voice belonged to Security Chief Takamor, whose reptilian features showed confusion rather than hostility. "You are under arrest for what?" Marcus asked, still speaking into the broadcast system, so his words echoed throughout the station. "For telling the truth, for trying to save the life of a doctor who dedicated his career to healing. You don't understand the complexities. I understand that you're about to murder someone who was trying to protect my people." Marcus looked directly into Takamor's eyes. "I understand that every moment we waste talking is a moment closer to Dr. Vextar's death." Through the internal monitors, Marcus saw something that gave him hope. Medical personnel were gathering outside Surgery Bay 1. Not security staff or administrative officials, but doctors and nurses who had heard his broadcast and were demanding answers. Dr. Keth Ara was among them, her 4 arms gesturing emphatically as she argued with someone off-screen. Other medical staff Marcus recognized from his cleaning duties were joining the crowd, their voices adding to a growing chorus of dissent. Chief Medical Officer Grixtal came a new voice over the communication system. It was Dr. Nalseth, and she sounded shaken. "I'm suspending the neural extraction procedure pending a full investigation of these allegations." "You don't have the authority." Grixtal's voice was sharp with anger. "I have the authority to question any procedure that may violate medical ethics, and I have the obligation to investigate claims of illegal experimentation on sentient beings." Marcus felt a surge of hope. His broadcast was working. The medical staff of Helix 7 were remembering their obligations as healers, questioning the orders they'd been following blindly. But Grixtal wasn't finished. "This human is a known disruptor," the chief medical officer announced over the communication system. "It has damaged critical station systems and accessed classified information. Its claims are the desperate lies of a creature facing termination." "Then let's examine the evidence." Dr. Kethara's voice joined the broadcast. "If the human's claims are false, the investigation will prove it. If they're true." "If they're true," Dr. Nalseth added, "then we're all complicit in crimes that violate everything we swore to protect." Security Chief Takamor looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect. "The broadcast, the evidence you mentioned, is it real?" "Check the transmission logs," Marcus said quietly. "The data was sent to the Interspecies Medical Ethics Board, the Human Colonial Authority, and 12 independent news organizations. If Dr. Vextar dies tonight, the entire galaxy will know that Helix 7 murdered him to cover up war crimes." Takamor activated his communication device. "All security teams stand down. Medical staff have priority in Surgery Bay 1, pending investigation of the allegations." Through the monitors, Marcus watched as the crowd of medical personnel entered Surgery Bay 1. The neural extraction equipment was still humming, still preparing to destroy Vextar's mind, but now it was surrounded by doctors demanding explanations. Grixtal stood at the center of the storm, his massive form towering over the other medical staff, but for the first time since Marcus had known him, the chief medical officer looked uncertain. "You've won this battle, human," Takmor said quietly, "but you realize this isn't over. Even if you've saved your doctor friend, there will be consequences for what you've done tonight." Marcus looked at the security chief, then at the monitors showing the crowd of medical personnel protecting Vextar. Some things are worth the consequences. But even as he said it, Marcus knew that the real battle was just beginning. Surgery Bay 1 had become a battleground of words and wills. Through the station's internal monitors, Marcus watched as medical personnel surrounded the neural extraction equipment, their voices rising in heated debate. Dr. Grixtal stood at the center of the storm, his 6 eyes darting between the various doctors as he tried to maintain control of a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond his grasp. "This is preposterous," Grixtal's voice boomed over the communication system, which was still broadcasting to the entire station. "You're allowing a primitive creature to undermine legitimate medical procedures with conspiracy theories and emotional manipulation." "Then explain the evidence," Dr. Cathara demanded, her 4 arms holding a portable display that showed the documents Marcus had transmitted. "Explain these communication logs detailing illegal experimentation on human subjects. Explain the references to specimen acquisition and neural extraction protocols for dissidents. Those documents could have been fabricated by the human. Its species is known for deceptive behavior when threatened. The authentication codes are genuine," Dr. Nalseth interjected, her own scanner analyzing the data. "These communications originated from your personal account, Chief Medical Officer. The encryption signatures match your authorized access protocols." Marcus felt a surge of vindication as he watched Grixtal's composure begin to crack. The massive Gordanian's confident authority was giving way to something that looked increasingly like desperation. Even if there have been irregularities in our research protocols," Grixtal said, his voice losing some of its commanding tone. "Dr. Vexitar's neural extraction is a legitimate medical procedure. He's dying from plasma burns. The extraction will preserve his knowledge for future medical applications. His brain scans show minimal trauma," Dr. Cathara countered, pulling up holographic displays of Vextar's medical readings. "The plasma burns are severe but treatable. There's no medical justification for neural extraction. Unless," Dr. Nalseth added quietly, "the goal isn't to preserve his knowledge for medical purposes, but to extract information he discovered about Project Nightfall." The surgery bay fell silent except for the steady beeping of life support equipment. On the table, Dr. Vextar remained unconscious, unaware of the battle being fought over his life and mind. Security Chief Takmor, who had been listening to the exchange through his communication device, turned to Marcus. "The evidence you transmitted, how extensive is it?" "Complete communication logs for the past 18 months, Marcus replied. "Financial records showing payments to off-books facilities. Medical reports on human subjects who were supposed to have been transferred to colonial authorities but never arrived at their destinations. How did you access classified consortium communications?" "I didn't break into anything," Marcus said carefully. "I accessed Dr. Vextar's personal files with codes he'd given me for routine administrative tasks. He had already gathered most of the evidence as part of his investigation. Through the monitors, Marcus saw Dr. Cathara examining the neural extraction equipment more closely. Her expression grew increasingly disturbed as she analyzed the settings and calibration data. "This isn't configured for knowledge preservation," she announced, her voice carrying clearly over the communication system. "The extraction parameters are set for complete neural dissolution. This equipment is designed to destroy Dr. Vextar's consciousness entirely." That's impossible," Dr. Nalseth said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Why would anyone want to completely destroy a brilliant medical mind?" "Because that brilliant medical mind discovered something they couldn't allow him to share," Marcus said, his words broadcasting throughout the station. "Dr. Vextar found evidence of illegal human experimentation, and they were going to kill him to keep him quiet. The human is correct." The new voice sent a shock through everyone listening. Dr. Vextar had regained consciousness, his weak voice barely audible above the medical equipment surrounding him. "Doctor!" Dr. Cathara rushed to his side, her scanner already analyzing his vital signs. "Don't try to speak. You've been severely injured. I have to speak, Vextar whispered, his dark eyes finding the monitoring camera that was broadcasting throughout the station. Project Nightfall. It's worse than you know. Grixtal pushed forward, trying to reach the surgical table. He's delirious from trauma. Don't listen to... Stay back. Dr. Nalzeth blocked Grixtal's path, her surgical tools forming a barrier between the chief medical officer and his intended victim. Let him speak. Vextar's voice grew slightly stronger as medical stimulants began counteracting the sedatives in his system. Project Nightfall isn't just about experimenting on humans. It's about creating biological weapons using human genetic material. The surgery bay erupted in shocked voices, but Vextar continued with visible effort. Humans have unique immune system adaptations. The consortium has been studying captured humans to develop pathogens that target other species while leaving humans unaffected. They want to create weapons of genocide. That's absurd, Grixtal shouted, but his voice lacked its former authority. Even if such research existed, it would be for defensive purposes only. Defensive? Doctor. Cathara's voice was sharp with anger. You're talking about weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations. The communications logs, Vextar whispered, his eyes finding one of the monitoring cameras. Marcus, did you find the communications logs? I transmitted them to 12 different organizations, Marcus replied through the station's communication system. The evidence is out there. They can't cover this up anymore. Vexitar's pale blue features showed something that might have been a smile. Good. Then my investigation wasn't wasted. Your investigation is worthless, Grixtal snarled, his composure finally cracking completely. Even if you've exposed Project Nightfall, you have no idea how deep this goes. The consortium has operations throughout the galaxy. Destroying one station, exposing one project, means nothing. It means everything to the humans who won't be captured and tortured, Dr. Beatty, Nalseth said quietly. It means everything to the species that won't be destroyed by biological weapons. Security Chief Takmor's voice cut through the argument. Chief Medical Officer Grixtal, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit genocide, illegal experimentation on sentient beings, and attempted murder of a consortium physician. You can't arrest me, Grixtal's 6 eyes blazed with fury. I have authorization from the highest levels of the consortium. This research is sanctioned. Then they can explain that authorization to the Interspecies Criminal Court, Takmor replied calmly. Dr. Nalseth, please disconnect the neural extraction equipment immediately. As Dr. Nalseth began shutting down the deadly machinery, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years of living as a barely acknowledged servant. Genuine hope. But Grixtal wasn't finished. If you think this ends here, the chief medical officer said as security personnel moved to restrain him, you're more naive than I thought. Project Nightfall has facilities on dozens of worlds. Shutting down Helix 7 will barely slow them down. He looked directly into one of the monitoring cameras, and Marcus realized the massive alien was speaking directly to him. You've saved your precious doctor, human, but you've also painted a target on yourself and everyone you care about. The consortium doesn't forget and they don't forgive. Marcus felt a chill that went deeper than fear. Somewhere in human space, his daughter Sarah was living peacefully with relatives who believed he was working as a maintenance engineer on a peaceful medical station. Now, because of what he'd done tonight, she might be in danger. But as he watched Dr. Vextar being carefully moved to a proper medical facility, freed from the machinery that would have destroyed his mind, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth any risk. The hours following Grixtal's arrest passed in a blur of activity that Marcus watched from the medical bay, where he'd been taken for protective custody. Through the viewport, he could see shuttles arriving and departing from Helix 7's docking bays, investigators from the Interspecies Medical Ethics Board, representatives from various colonial governments, and what appeared to be military vessels from multiple species. His broadcast had done more than expose Project Nightfall. It had triggered a galactic incident. Dr. Vextar occupied the bed next to Marcus's, his plasma burns being treated with advanced regenerative therapy. The Zephyrian doctor was conscious but weak, his normally sharp features drawn with exhaustion. You realize what you've done, don't you? Vextar asked, his voice still barely above a whisper. I saved your life. You did much more than that. Vextar turned his head to look at Marcus directly. You've exposed a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of multiple governments. The evidence you transmitted, it's already causing political upheavals across Zephyrian space. Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. Good. Maybe that means other humans won't suffer what those prisoners did. Perhaps. But it also means that you're now one of the most wanted beings in the galaxy. The consortium has significant resources and a long memory. Before Marcus could respond, the medical bay doors slid open to admit 3 figures he didn't recognize. 2 were clearly military, a tall crystalline being whose species Marcus couldn't identify, and a human woman wearing the uniform of the Colonial Defense Force. The third was Dr. Nalzeth, who had been coordinating with the outside investigators. Marcus Chen, the human woman stepped forward, her bearing conveying authority despite her relatively young appearance. I'm Commander Sarah Martinez from the CDF Intelligence Division. We need to talk. Marcus felt his blood freeze. Sarah Martinez? But that's impossible. The commander's professional demeanor cracked slightly, showing confusion. I'm sorry. Do we know each other? You said your name was Sarah Martinez. Marcus's voice was barely audible. My daughter's name is Sarah Chen, but she would have taken her adoptive parent's name when... He stopped, staring at the woman's face more carefully. The same dark eyes he remembered from a frightened 8-year-old girl. The same stubborn set to her jaw that had helped her survive radiation poisoning when the colony ship failed. Dad? The word hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible gulf. Sarah Martinez, formerly Sarah Chen, stared at the man she remembered as a maintenance engineer who had somehow become the most important witness in a galactic conspiracy case. But you're supposed to be working on a peaceful medical station, Sarah said, her professional composure giving way to the confusion of a daughter who had just discovered her father was at the center of an interstellar incident. The letters you sent said you were doing routine maintenance work. I am. Marcus gestured around the medical bay. I clean floors and repair atmospheric processors. I also happened to uncover evidence of genocide. Doctor. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter, if he'd had more strength. Your father has a talent for understatement, Commander. He single-handedly exposed and disrupted a conspiracy that was planning to commit genocide against multiple species. Sarah looked between Marcus and Vextar, her training as an intelligence officer, warring with her emotions as a daughter. The report said a human maintenance worker broadcast evidence of illegal experimentation. I never imagined that it was your father. The crystalline being spoke for the first time, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I am Inspector Veltar from the Interspecies Criminal Court. Commander Martinez requested permission to handle this interview personally when she recognized your name. You've been investigating the consortium? Marcus asked Sarah. For the past 2 years. We've known something was happening to humans in Zephyrian space. People disappearing, ships going missing, colonies reporting population discrepancies, but we couldn't prove anything until your transmission arrived at Colonial Command. Sarah activated a holographic display that showed star charts with various marked locations. Project Nightfall has facilities on 17 worlds that we know of. Your evidence has given us enough proof to demand inspection of every site. That's more extensive than I realized. Marcus felt a growing sense of dread. How many humans are we talking about? Thousands, possibly tens of thousands over the past 5 years, Inspector Veltar replied. The scope of the operation is unprecedented in modern galactic history. Dr. Vextar struggled to sit up in his medical bed. There's something else you need to know. The biological weapons program wasn't just theoretical. They've already developed several prototype pathogens. Where? Sarah demanded, her professional instincts taking over. That's what I was trying to discover when they decided to silence me. The research data is stored on secure servers throughout the consortium's network, but the actual weapons are being tested at a facility in the Kepler sector. That's deep in Zephyrian military space, the crystalline inspector noted. Accessing it would require significant coordination between multiple governments. Sarah said slowly, it would require someone with intimate knowledge of consortium operations and facilities. Marcus realized what she was suggesting. You want me to help you find the weapons. You've already proven that you can access classified information and move through consortium facilities without detection. With Dr. Vextar's knowledge and your unique skills, you might be able to locate and neutralize the biological weapons before they can be deployed. Absolutely not. Dr. Vextar's voice was firm despite his weakness. Marcus has done enough. He's exposed the conspiracy and saved countless lives. Asking him to infiltrate a maximum security research facility is asking him to commit suicide. I'll do it, Marcus said quietly. No. Vextar turned to look at him with intensity. You have a daughter to think about. You've already taken enormous risks. And because I have a daughter, I have to see this through. Marcus met Sarah's gaze. If these weapons exist, if they're tested and deployed, how many children like Sarah will die? How many families will be destroyed? Sarah's expression was conflicted, torn between her duty as an intelligence officer and her concern as a daughter. Dad, what Dr. Vextar is saying, the risks are enormous. The consortium knows you're responsible for exposing Project Nightfall. They'll be watching for you. Which is exactly why I might be able to succeed where a formal military operation would fail. Marcus smiled at his daughter, the scared 8-year-old who had grown up to become a colonial defense force commander. They see me as a janitor, Sarah, a maintenance worker who got lucky with some computer files. They don't expect me to be capable of complex operations. But you are capable, Dr. Vextar said. Your actions here proved that. You planned and executed a sophisticated intelligence operation under extreme pressure. That's not the work of a simple maintenance worker. Inspector Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what might have been agreement. The human's point is valid. His perceived limitations could be an advantage in this situation. But the mission would require support, technical assistance, extraction protocols, real-time intelligence. We can provide all of that, Sarah said, though her voice was reluctant. The question is whether we should. Marcus looked around the medical bay, at Dr. Vextar, who had saved his daughter's life and was now being treated as an equal colleague, at Inspector Veltar, a being from a species he'd never encountered who was treating him with respect, at Sarah, the little girl he'd thought he'd lost, who had grown into a woman dedicated to protecting others. 3 years ago, he'd been nobody, a maintenance engineer on a failing colony ship. Tonight, he'd become someone who could make a difference in the lives of thousands of people across the galaxy. When do we start? He asked. The covert operations ship, Whisper's Edge, was nothing like the medical stations or colony vessels Marcus had known. Built for stealth and speed, it moved through space like a shadow, its hull designed to absorb sensor sweeps and deflect casual observation. For the past 72 hours, it had been his home as they traveled toward the Kepler sector and the secret facility where the consortium's biological weapons were being developed. Marcus stood in the ship's small observation lounge, watching the stars shift as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the target system. Beside him, Sarah reviewed intelligence reports on a portable display, her expression growing more troubled with each piece of information they received. The facility is larger than we expected, she said, highlighting sections of the holographic display. Long-range scans show at least 3 separate research complexes connected by underground tunnels. Security is extensive. How extensive? Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Orbital defense platforms, automated patrol ships, ground-based sensor arrays, and at least 2 battalions of consortium security forces. Sarah looked at her father with concern. Dad, this isn't like Helix 7. You won't be able to walk through maintenance corridors unobserved. Dr. Vextar, who had insisted on joining the mission despite his injuries, manipulated the display to show detailed facility schematics. The research complexes are built into a series of natural cave systems on Kepler-7's third moon. The biological weapons labs are located in the deepest sections, approximately 2 kilometers underground. Accessible how? Asked Commander Torres, the mission's tactical specialist. There are 3 primary access routes: the main shuttle bay, a secondary cargo entrance, and an emergency evacuation shaft that connects to the surface. Vextar highlighted each route on the display. However, all of these are heavily monitored and secured. Marcus studied the schematics, his mind working through possibilities. 3 years of maintaining complex systems on Helix 7 had taught him to think like infrastructure, to see the hidden pathways and overlooked connections that kept facilities operational. What about life support? He asked. A facility that size, 2 kilometers underground, would require massive atmospheric processing systems. The atmospheric plants are located on the surface, Sarah confirmed, pulling up additional data. Conduits run through the cave systems to distribute air and regulate temperature throughout the facility. And those conduits would need maintenance access points. You're thinking of accessing the facility through the life support system? Commander Torres looked skeptical. That's incredibly dangerous. One mistake and you could poison the entire facility's atmosphere. Or, Marcus said quietly, I could use the atmospheric system to deliver something other than fresh air. Doctor, Vextar's eyes widened as he understood what Marcus was suggesting. The neutralizing agent. If we could introduce it into the facility's air supply. What neutralizing agent? Sarah asked. Dr. Vextar developed it during his investigation of Project Nightfall, Marcus explained. A compound that breaks down the specific proteins used in the consortium's biological weapons. It's harmless to living beings, but destroys the weapons at a molecular level. Theoretically, Vextar added. I've never had a chance to test it under field conditions. So you want to infiltrate a maximum security research facility, access their atmospheric processing system, and introduce an untested chemical agent into their air supply, Commander Torres summarized. And you want to do this while avoiding detection by 2 battalions of security forces and multiple layers of automated defense systems. That's about right, Marcus said. It's insane. It's also probably the only plan that has any chance of success, Sarah said reluctantly. A direct military assault would trigger immediate retaliation, and by the time we fought through their defenses, they could destroy the weapons or relocate them. This approach could neutralize the entire program before they know we're there. Inspector Veltar, who had been silent throughout the planning discussion, finally spoke. There's another consideration. Intelligence reports suggest that the consortium is planning to begin field testing of their weapons within the next few days. If we don't act soon, innocent populations could be exposed to these pathogens. The weight of that statement settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Marcus thought about the thousands of humans who had already disappeared into the consortium's research programs, and the millions more who could die if the biological weapons were deployed. What do you need from us? Sarah asked. Transport to the moon's surface, equipment to access and modify atmospheric systems, and an extraction plan for when things go wrong. Marcus looked around the group. Because they will go wrong. Operations like this always do. We'll position the ship in the asteroid field on the outer edge of the system, Commander Torres said. That should keep us hidden from the facility's sensors, while maintaining the ability to extract you quickly if necessary. How quickly? Marcus asked. If everything goes perfectly, 12 minutes from the time you signal for pickup. If there are complications, Torres shrugged. We'll do our best. Dr. Vextar activated another display showing chemical formulas and molecular structures. The neutralizing agent will need approximately 30 minutes to circulate through the facility's entire atmospheric system. During that time, you'll be trapped inside with whatever security forces respond to your presence. 30 minutes, Marcus repeated. I can manage 30 minutes. Can you? Sarah's voice was tight with concern. Dad, you're not a trained operative. You're a maintenance worker who happened to uncover a conspiracy. This mission requires skills you don't have. Marcus thought about that assessment. 3 years ago, she would have been right. He had been nothing more than a maintenance engineer, someone who fixed broken machines and kept systems running. But 3 years of surviving in a place where he was considered less than human had taught him skills no training program could provide. I know how to be invisible, he said finally. I know how to move through places where I don't belong without being noticed. And I know how to fix things that are broken. He looked at the facility schematics again, seeing not a fortress but a complex machine that needed maintenance. The consortium's biological weapons program is broken, Sarah. It's a system that destroys innocent lives to create instruments of genocide. I may not be a trained operative, but I know how to fix broken systems. By shutting them down permanently, Vextar added with something that sounded like pride. Exactly. 6 hours later, Marcus found himself in a modified maintenance suit, floating in space above Kepler-7's third moon. The facility below was invisible from orbit, hidden beneath layers of rock and sophisticated camouflage systems. But thermal imaging revealed the heat signatures of the atmospheric processing plants that kept the underground complex livable. Atmospheric entry in 60 seconds, came Sarah's voice through his communication system. Remember, once you're inside their sensor perimeter, we won't be able to communicate until you complete the mission. I understand. Dad? Sarah's voice was softer now, less professional. Be careful. I just found you again. I don't want to lose you. You won't, Marcus promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. See you in a few hours. The atmospheric entry was rougher than he'd expected, but the modified suit protected him from the worst of it. He landed near the primary atmospheric processing plant, a massive structure that hummed with the sound of machinery, working to keep thousands of people alive in an underground facility. Marcus approached the plant's maintenance entrance, studying the security systems with the eye of someone who had spent years servicing similar equipment. The locks were sophisticated but not impregnable, designed to keep out casual intruders, not someone with intimate knowledge of atmospheric processing systems. He began working on the access panel, his tools moving with the confidence of long experience. In a few minutes he would be inside the facility that housed the consortium's most deadly secrets, and then the real work would begin. The atmospheric processing plant's interior was a maze of pipes, filters, and monitoring equipment that sang with the constant hum of machinery, keeping an underground city alive. Marcus moved through the facility with practiced efficiency, his tools working to bypass security systems that were sophisticated but not designed to stop someone who understood their fundamental architecture. The neutralizing agent, Dr. Vextar had developed, was contained in a small cylinder attached to Marcus's equipment belt, such an innocuous container to hold the key to destroying a program of genocide. Marcus found the main distribution hub, a central chamber, where processed air was channeled through dozens of conduits that fed different sections of the underground facility. According to the schematics, the biological weapons labs were serviced by 3 specific conduits that ran deeper into the cave system. He was attaching the dispersal device to the first conduit when he heard footsteps approaching through the access corridor. "Told you, the atmospheric readings are within normal parameters," a voice was saying in Zephyrian. "There's no reason to suspect infiltration. And I'm telling you that the security alert from Helix 7 specifically mentioned a human with technical expertise," replied another voice. "Chief Administrator wants all critical systems checked hourly until further notice." Marcus quickly concealed himself behind a bank of atmospheric processors as 2 consortium security officers entered the distribution hub. Through gaps in the machinery, he could see them, both Zephyrians, armed with energy weapons and sensor equipment. "Atmospheric composition is normal," the first officer reported, checking readings on his scanner. "Temperature regulation is functioning properly. No signs of tampering." Marcus held his breath as the second officer moved closer to where he was hiding. The dispersal device was already attached to the first conduit, but he still needed to install devices on the other 2 conduits to ensure complete facility coverage. "Wait," the second officer said, stopping near the central hub. "There's an anomalous reading on distribution line 7. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Distribution line 7 was one of the conduits he needed to treat. What kind of anomaly? Slight pressure variance. Could be a blockage or deliberate tampering. Both officers moved toward the conduit, their weapons drawn. Marcus calculated distances and angles, trying to determine if he could complete his mission before they discovered his presence. That's when the facility's emergency alarm system activated. The piercing klaxon that filled the atmospheric plant was different from the alarm Marcus had triggered on Helix 7. This was the sound of a facility preparing for external attack, not internal sabotage. "All security personnel to battle stations," came an announcement over the facility's communication system. "We are under attack by colonial defense forces. This is not a drill." The 2 officers looked at each other in confusion. "I thought this facility was classified beyond colonial intelligence capabilities," one said. "Apparently not. Come on. We're needed at defensive positions." They ran from the atmospheric plant, leaving Marcus alone with his mission. But the alarm had changed everything. If colonial forces were attacking the facility, it meant that the covert approach had failed. It meant that Sarah and the others were in immediate danger. Marcus pushed aside his concern for the moment and focused on completing his task. He quickly attached dispersal devices to the remaining 2 conduits, programming them to release the neutralizing agent simultaneously. The process would take 30 minutes to ensure complete saturation of the facility's atmosphere, but as he activated the devices, Marcus realized that 30 minutes might be too long. If colonial forces were attacking the facility, the consortium might choose to destroy the biological weapons rather than allow them to be captured. He needed to reach the actual laboratories and ensure that the weapons were neutralized before they could be moved or destroyed. Marcus consulted the facility schematics on his portable display and identified the most direct route to the biological weapons labs. It would require leaving the relative safety of the maintenance areas and moving through sections of the facility that would be crawling with security personnel. The corridors outside the atmospheric plant were in chaos. Consortium personnel ran past carrying equipment and weapons, their attention focused on the external threat rather than internal security. Marcus used the confusion to his advantage, moving through maintenance passages and service corridors that paralleled the main thoroughfares. The deeper he went into the facility, the more disturbing it became. Through observation windows, he could see laboratories filled with equipment he didn't recognize, tanks containing floating biological specimens, analysis chambers glowing with unnatural energies, and workstations where scientists in protective suits manipulated what could only be weaponized pathogens. But it was the holding cells that made his blood run cold. Through a reinforced window, Marcus saw rows of containment chambers, each holding a human subject in various stages of experimentation. Some appeared to be sleeping, connected to monitoring equipment that tracked their vital signs. Others showed signs of physical alteration, genetic modifications that had changed their basic physiology in ways that looked both painful and irreversible. These were the missing humans, the thousands of people who had disappeared into the consortium's research program. They weren't just test subjects, they were raw material for creating biological weapons that could destroy entire civilizations. Marcus forced himself to continue deeper into the facility. The neutralizing agent would help some of these people, but the damage that had already been done might be irreversible. The only way to prevent future atrocities was to ensure that the weapons program itself was completely destroyed. The biological weapons storage facility was located at the deepest level of the complex, behind multiple layers of security that had been designed to keep the weapons contained rather than keep intruders out. The assumption was that no one could reach this level without authorization. They hadn't planned for a maintenance worker with nothing left to lose. Marcus bypassed the final security checkpoint and entered the storage facility. What he found there defied his worst expectations. Rows upon rows of containment units, each holding samples of biological weapons designed to target specific species. Labels in multiple languages identified pathogens that could destroy crystalline respiratory systems, Gordanian neural networks, human immune responses, and dozens of other species-specific biological functions. The scope of the genocide being planned was staggering. The consortium hadn't just developed weapons to destroy humanity, they had developed weapons to destroy virtually every spacefaring species in the galaxy. At the center of the facility was a control station showing deployment schedules and target populations. According to the display, field testing was scheduled to begin in less than 6 hours. The first target was a human colony in the Perseus Arm, with a population of nearly 2 million people. Marcus accessed the control system and began programming it to release all of the stored biological agents into the facility's waste disposal system, where they would be neutralized by the same processes used to destroy other hazardous materials. It was a crude solution, but it would ensure that the weapons could never be deployed. As he worked, the facility's alarm system changed tone. Instead of the external attack warning, it was now broadcasting an evacuation order. All personnel evacuate immediately. Facility will be sealed in 10 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately. Marcus realized what was happening. The consortium had decided to cut their losses. Rather than risk having their biological weapons program exposed, they were planning to seal the entire facility with everything and everyone still inside, including the human test subjects in the holding cells. Marcus looked at the control station display showing his progress. The weapons destruction sequence was only half complete. If he left now, some of the biological agents might survive to be recovered later. But if he stayed to finish the job, he would be trapped when the facility sealed. He thought about Sarah waiting somewhere above in a ship that was probably under attack by consortium forces. He thought about the 2 million people in the Perseus colony who would die if even one of these weapons survived. He thought about the thousands of human subjects in the holding cells who had already suffered so much. Marcus made his choice. He continued working on the destruction sequence, programming the facility's systems to release and neutralize every biological weapon in storage. The process would take another 15 minutes to complete, 5 minutes longer than the evacuation window. But as he worked, Marcus discovered something that changed everything. The facility's life support systems were connected to the same network that controlled the biological weapons storage. If he could modify the atmospheric processing from here, he might be able to accelerate the release of Dr. Vextar's neutralizing agent throughout the entire complex. It was risky. Flooding the facility with an untested compound could have unpredictable effects, but it might also save the lives of the human test subjects by neutralizing whatever biological agents had been used in their experimentation. Marcus began reprogramming the atmospheric systems, his fingers flying over the control interfaces as the evacuation countdown continued in the background. Facility seal in 5 minutes. All personnel must evacuate immediately. Almost there. Just a few more commands to execute. Facility seal in 3 minutes. The biological weapons destruction was complete. The neutralizing agent was flooding through the facility's atmosphere. In a few minutes, every pathogen and experimental virus in the complex would be rendered harmless. Facility seal in 1 minute. Marcus saved his work and turned toward the exit, knowing he would never make it to the surface in time. But as he reached the storage facility's entrance, he found his path blocked by a figure he recognized. Dr. Grixtel stood in the doorway, his massive form filling the entrance completely. The former chief medical officer of Helix 7 wore the black uniform of Consortium Special Operations, and his 6 eyes blazed with hatred. "Going somewhere, human. Facility seal in 30 seconds. The countdown echoed through the biological weapons storage chamber as Marcus faced Grixtel across a space filled with now neutralized instruments of genocide. The massive Gordanian's black uniform bore insignia that Marcus didn't recognize, but the hatred in his 6 eyes was unmistakable. "I have to admit, human, I underestimated you," Grixtel said, his voice carrying easily over the facility's warning systems. "When you first interfered with my operations on Helix 7, I assumed you were simply a clever animal protecting its owner. I never imagined you were capable of this." He gestured around the storage facility, where every containment unit now showed readings indicating complete pathogen neutralization. "Do you have any idea what you've destroyed?" Grixtel continued, stepping into the chamber. "Years of research, billions of credits in development costs, the future security of the Zephyrian Empire." "I destroyed weapons of genocide," Marcus replied, backing toward the chamber's secondary exit. "I stopped you from murdering millions of innocent people." "Innocent?" Grixtel's laugh was sharp and bitter. "There are no innocent species in the galaxy, human, only predators and prey. The Consortium was ensuring that the Zephyrian Empire would never again be prey by becoming the ultimate predator. By taking control of our own survival." The facility's alarm system cut off abruptly, replaced by the deep, resonant hum of massive security barriers sealing the complex. They were trapped. "The facility is now sealed," came a final automated announcement. "Atmospheric purge will commence in 60 minutes to ensure containment of all biological hazards." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Atmospheric purge, standard procedure for biological research facilities," Grixtel explained with cold satisfaction. "In 60 minutes, every molecule of air in this complex will be vented into space and replaced with sterilized atmosphere. Nothing survives an atmospheric purge, not biological weapons, not experimental subjects, and certainly not interfering humans." "What about you?" "I have a personal atmospheric unit. I can survive the purge easily." Grixtel's 6 eyes focused on Marcus with predatory intensity. "You, however, will suffocate along with the rest of the contaminated material." Marcus continued backing toward the secondary exit, but Grixtel moved to block his path. The Gordanian was larger, stronger, and had weapons. In a direct confrontation, Marcus had no chance of survival, but 3 years of maintaining complex systems had taught him that direct confrontation wasn't always the best approach. "You know what I find interesting?" Marcus said, trying to keep Grixtel talking while he evaluated his options. "You keep calling me human as if it's an insult, but everything I've accomplished, I've done because I'm human, not in spite of it." "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning that humans don't give up. We don't accept that some people are predators and others are prey. When we see something broken, we fix it. When we see someone in trouble, we help them. When we see evil, we fight it." Marcus gestured toward the neutralized weapon storage. "You saw humans as inferior because we don't have your advanced technology or your sophisticated biology, but you missed the most important thing about us." "Which is?" "We're stubborn." Marcus suddenly dove toward one of the equipment panels, activating the facility's emergency maintenance protocols. Immediately, automated systems began activating throughout the chamber: fire suppression systems, emergency lighting, and most importantly, the facility's internal transport tubes that were used to move equipment between levels. Grixtel lunged toward him, but Marcus was already rolling toward one of the transport tube access points. The Gordanian's size, which had been an advantage in blocking exits, now worked against him as he struggled to change direction quickly enough to catch his more agile quarry. Marcus reached the transport tube and dove inside, just as Grixtel's massive hand snatched at where he had been. The tube's automated systems activated, carrying him upward through the facility at high speed. But as the tube carried him toward the upper levels, Marcus realized that he hadn't escaped. He'd only delayed the inevitable. The facility was sealed. The atmospheric purge would begin in less than an hour. and somewhere in the depths of the complex, thousands of human test subjects were still trapped in holding cells. The transport tube deposited him on the facility's medical level, where the human subjects were being held. Through observation windows, Marcus could see that some of the prisoners were beginning to stir. The neutralizing agent in the atmosphere was apparently counteracting some of the drugs that had kept them sedated. Marcus found the holding cell controls and began initiating emergency release protocols. If he was going to die in this facility, he was at least going to give these people a chance to survive. The first wave of holding cells opened, revealing human subjects in various stages of consciousness. Some were able to walk, others required assistance from their fellow prisoners. Marcus activated the facility's emergency evacuation protocols, hoping to guide them toward areas that might offer protection during the atmospheric purge. "This way," Marcus called out, gesturing toward emergency shelters that were designed to protect facility personnel during atmospheric maintenance. "There are protective chambers on this level that might shield you from the purge." As the rescued humans began moving toward the emergency shelters, Marcus heard heavy footsteps approaching through the corridors. Grixtal had found another way to reach the medical level. "You're only prolonging their suffering," the Gordanian called out as he searched through the maze of laboratories and holding areas. "The atmospheric purge will kill them whether they're in holding cells or emergency shelters." Marcus continued opening holding cells, freeing every human subject he could find. Some were too weak to move, victims of experiments that had left them barely alive. Others showed signs of genetic modification that would require medical treatment far beyond what was available in the sealed facility. But they were alive, and they were free, and that was something. "Atmospheric purge in 30 minutes, came the automated announcement. Marcus had opened the last of the holding cells when Grixtal finally cornered him in the medical level's main corridor. The Gordanian moved slowly now, savoring what he clearly saw as his inevitable victory. "You've accomplished nothing, human," Grixtal said, his weapons trained on Marcus. "These subjects are still going to die. The weapons program will be rebuilt elsewhere. All you've done is delay the inevitable." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but sometimes delay is enough." That's when the facility shook with the impact of something massive striking its outer defenses. Through the observation windows, Marcus could see flashes of energy weapons and the distinctive engine signatures of Colonial Defense Force ships. "The cavalry arrives," Marcus said with a smile. Grixtal's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "Impossible. This facility is in restricted space. Colonial forces don't have the authorization to—" "They do now," Marcus interrupted. "When I transmitted evidence of Project Nightfall, I also included the location of every consortium facility mentioned in your communications logs. The Interspecies Criminal Court issued emergency warrants for the inspection of all suspected sites. Another impact shook the facility, and this time the lights flickered as power conduits were damaged. Even if they breach the facility," Grixtal snarled, "it won't matter. The atmospheric purge will begin in 20 minutes. Your colonial friends will find nothing but corpses." "Will they?" Marcus activated his personal communication device, a short-range unit that he'd kept powered down during his infiltration. Immediately, Sarah's voice filled the corridor. "Dad, are you all right? We're detecting massive structural damage to the facility." "I'm fine, but we have a problem. The facility is sealed and there's an atmospheric purge scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. There are thousands of human prisoners trapped inside. We're working on breaching the main entrance, but the facility's defenses—" "The atmospheric processing plant on the surface," Marcus interrupted. "If you can access the primary air intake, you can pump breathable atmosphere into the facility during the purge. It won't stop the purge completely, but it might create pockets of survivable air." "That's actually brilliant. We'll need exact specifications. Dr. Vextar has the facility schematics. He can guide your engineers." Grixtal raised his weapon, his face twisted with rage. "Enough! You've interfered with consortium operations for the last time." But before he could fire, the facility shook again, not from external weapons fire, but from internal explosions as colonial forces breached the main entrance. Emergency lighting activated throughout the complex as primary power systems failed. "Consortium personnel, this is Colonel Sarah Martinez of the Colonial Defense Force," came an announcement over the facility's communication system. "You are ordered to surrender immediately. This facility is now under the jurisdiction of the Interspecies Criminal Court." Grixtal's weapon wavered as he realized that his position had become untenable. Around them, the sound of approaching footsteps indicated that colonial forces were advancing through the facility rapidly. "This isn't over," Grixtal said, lowering his weapon. "The consortium has resources throughout the galaxy. We will rebuild. We will continue our work." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but not here. Not today. And not with these people." Through the corridor, Marcus could see human subjects being guided toward the emergency shelters by colonial personnel who had reached the medical level. They would survive the atmospheric purge. They would receive medical treatment. They would go home to families who had thought they were lost forever. It wasn't everything, it wasn't perfect, but it was enough. As colonial forces took Grixtal into custody, Marcus allowed himself a moment to feel something he hadn't experienced in 3 years of living as a barely acknowledged servant: pride. He'd started this mission as a janitor, trying to save his friend. He was ending it as someone who had helped save thousands of lives and exposed a conspiracy that threatened the entire galaxy. Not bad for a maintenance worker. 6 months after the destruction of the Kepler facility, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed interspecies medical research station Vexitar, watching ships from dozens of worlds dock at the station's expanded bays. The facility bore little resemblance to the sterile hierarchical environment of Helix 7. Here, researchers from multiple species worked as equals, sharing knowledge and resources in pursuit of healing rather than destruction. "The third quarterly report shows remarkable progress," Dr. Vexitar said, approaching with a data pad in his hands. The Zephyrian doctor had recovered fully from his injuries, and his new position as Director of Ethical Medical Research seemed to suit him. "We've successfully treated over 800 former consortium test subjects, and the rehabilitation programs are showing significant success rates." Marcus nodded, watching through the viewport as a transport ship disembarked a group of humans who had been recovered from a consortium facility in the Andromeda sector. They moved slowly, supported by medical personnel, but they were alive and free, something that wouldn't have been possible 6 months ago. "How many facilities have been shut down now?" Marcus asked. 17 confirmed, with investigations ongoing at 12 more sites. Vexitar joined him at the viewport. "The evidence you gathered on Helix 7 and the Kepler facility has led to the largest war crimes investigation in galactic history. The consortium as an organization has been dissolved, and individual members are facing prosecution on dozens of worlds. And Grixtal? Life imprisonment on charges of genocide and crimes against sentient beings. He's being held in a maximum security facility on Proxima Station, where he'll have plenty of time to contemplate the consequences of his actions." Through the viewport, Marcus saw a familiar figure disembarking from one of the newly arrived ships, Colonel Sarah Martinez, still wearing her Colonial Defense Force uniform, but now bearing the additional insignia of the Interspecies Criminal Court's Special Investigation Division. "Your daughter's here," Vexitar observed. "She's testifying at the tribunal hearings this week, the case against the consortium leadership." "And after that?" Marcus smiled. "She's taking leave to spend some time with her father. Apparently she has 3 years of missed conversations to catch up on." "What about you? Any plans beyond your current role as Special Advisor to the Medical Ethics Board?" Marcus considered the question. His official title was impressive, but his actual work remained much the same as it had always been, maintaining systems, solving problems, and helping people who needed assistance. The main difference was that now people listened when he spoke and valued his input as more than the observations of a talking pet. "I've been thinking about that," Marcus said. "The Ethics Board has asked me to help establish oversight protocols for medical research throughout the galaxy. It would mean traveling to different worlds, inspecting facilities, making sure that what happened with Project Nightfall never happens again." "That sounds like important work." "It is. But it's also work that would keep me away from home for extended periods." Marcus paused. "I spent 3 years separated from my daughter because I thought I was doing the right thing. I'm not sure I want to make that choice again." "What if you didn't have to choose?" Before Marcus could ask what Vexitar meant, Sarah appeared in the observation deck doorway, but she wasn't alone. Behind her came a young woman Marcus hadn't seen in person for 3 years, his daughter Sarah, now grown into a confident military officer, but still possessing the same determined spirit that had helped her survive radiation poisoning as a child. "Dad," Sarah said, embracing him with the fierce intensity of someone who had thought she'd lost her parent forever. "I've been talking with Dr. Vexitar about a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "The Ethics Board needs field investigators, people who can travel to different worlds and inspect medical facilities, but they also need administrative support, communication specialists, and tactical advisors." Sarah smiled. It turns out that a father-daughter team with experience in both maintenance operations and military intelligence might be exactly what they're looking for. Marcus looked between Sarah and Vextar. You're suggesting we work together? I'm suggesting that the galaxy needs people who understand both the technical aspects of medical research and the ethical obligations that come with it, Vextar replied. You've proven that you can identify problems that others miss and find solutions that others can't see. Your daughter has proven that she can provide the military and intelligence support needed to address those problems effectively. Plus, Sarah added, someone needs to keep an eye on you. Your tendency to infiltrate maximum security facilities and expose galactic conspiracies is giving me grey hair. Marcus laughed, remembering a similar conversation he'd had with Vextar years ago about taking calculated risks. And this would be less dangerous? Different dangerous, Sarah admitted, but we'd be facing it together. Through the viewport, Marcus could see more ships arriving at the station, vessels carrying medical supplies to worlds recovering from consortium experimentation, researchers collaborating on treatments for genetic modification damage, and investigators working to ensure that the crimes of Project Nightfall were never repeated. There's something else, Vextar said, activating a holographic display that showed star charts marked with various symbols. We've identified nearly 3,000 individuals who were subjected to consortium experimentation and survived. They're scattered across dozens of worlds, many of them struggling with the physical and psychological aftermath of their experiences. They need help, Marcus said, understanding immediately. They need someone who understands what they've been through, someone who knows what it's like to be treated as less than human and find the strength to prove otherwise. Vextar looked at Marcus directly. They need someone who can show them that survival is possible, that recovery is possible, and that their lives still have meaning. Marcus thought about the human subjects he'd freed from the Kepler facility, many of whom were now receiving treatment here on Station Vexitar. Their road to recovery was long and difficult, but they were making progress. They were rebuilding their lives and finding new purpose after experiencing horrors that most beings couldn't imagine. When do we start? Marcus asked. Tomorrow, Sarah replied with a smile. Our first assignment is investigating reports of unauthorized genetic research on a mining world in the Vega system. Intelligence suggests that former consortium researchers may be attempting to restart their operations under corporate cover. Sounds familiar. It should. Apparently, there are a lot of people in the galaxy who think that treating other beings as experimental subjects is acceptable. Sarah's expression grew serious. It's going to take time to change that. It's going to require constant vigilance and people willing to speak up when they see something wrong. Marcus nodded, remembering his first day on Helix 7 when he'd been nothing more than a janitor trying to work off a debt. He'd never imagined that his willingness to clean floors and maintain atmospheric processes would eventually lead to exposing a galactic conspiracy and saving thousands of lives. You know, he said to Vextar, 3 years ago when I first started working for you, I thought my job was to clean up messes and keep systems running properly. And now? Marcus looked out at the ships continuing to dock at the station, bringing hope and healing to beings who had suffered under the consortium's cruelty. He thought about the investigations they would conduct, the facilities they would inspect, and the people they would help. Now I realize that's exactly what my job still is, Marcus said. Clean up messes and keep systems running properly. It's just that some of those systems are bigger than I originally thought. Vextar's laugh was warm and genuine. I think you'll find that the principles remain the same regardless of scale. Identify the problem, understand how it works, and fix what's broken. And sometimes, Sarah added, putting her arm around her father's shoulders, the most broken systems are the ones that need the most attention. As they stood together in the observation deck, watching the galaxy's species work together to heal the wounds caused by hatred and fear, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. He'd started as a maintenance worker trying to save his daughter's life. He'd become a janitor, trying to work off a debt. He'd evolved into someone willing to risk everything to protect a friend. Now he was something he'd never expected to be, a symbol of hope for beings throughout the galaxy who had been told they were worthless, expendable, less than human. It wasn't a bad legacy for a guy who used to clean floors. Come on, Sarah said, heading toward the docking bay where their ship was waiting. We have work to do. Marcus followed his daughter toward their next assignment, ready to continue the work of fixing broken systems and helping people who needed assistance. Behind them, Dr. Vextar watched from the observation deck, proud of what his former janitor had become. In the depths of space, Station Vextar continued its mission of healing and hope, a testament to the idea that every sentient being, regardless of species, background, or circumstances, possessed inherent dignity and worth. And in the galaxy beyond, former consortium researchers who might have thought their crimes were forgotten discovered that a maintenance worker who had once been dismissed as barely sentient was now watching, investigating, and ensuring that the phrase "never again" had real meaning. Some messes, Marcus had learned, were too important not to clean up.